And this is Max of Max CTCG. Thanks for joining me in another video. In this video, I'm going over my Centur-Ion branded deck that I played at the Rosemont Regional. I'll be covering it in different waves. It'll be a really long one that everyone on Patreon will have access to, as well as the shorter videos right away. But then I'm going to release these on YouTube, probably a couple videos a week at a time until the whole series is finished. If you want early access to kind of get everything right away, check out Patreon. It'll be in the gold tier list. Hey everyone, so in this section, we're going to go over my regional report. We'll do a quick kind of overview, and then we'll do more in depth. At the Rosemont Regional, I won a lot of die rolls, which was kind of disappointing for the matches that I did lose because of that. So that was a little bit upsetting, but for round one, I faced Pure Snake Eye. I won the die roll and ended up losing 1-2. Round two, I won the die roll against Goblin Biker. I won 2-0. In round three, I faced Melodious. I won the die roll and I lost 0-2. Round four, I won the die roll against Runick Stun. I won 2-0. Round 5 against Dinomorphia, I won the die roll, I won 2-1. And then round 6, I lost the die roll and I lost 0-2. Round 7 against Purrely, I lost the die roll, but I won 2-1. And then round 8, I lost the die roll and I won 2-1 against Voiceless Voice. And then for round 9, against Kashtira Snake Eye, I did win the die roll and I lost 1-2. I'll go through these matchups, kind of discuss what happened. A lot of the matches I think I could have won that I lost. And the only one that I felt like I lost that I really didn't have a chance in was just the Labrynth matchup. You know, my opponent opened up well, he played well, and I did make some mistakes, but overall, even looking back, if I would have played just slightly better for the minor mistakes I made, I don't think I would have won in those situations. I think the Labrynth matchup is kind of hit or miss, depending on how different things open up and what you get to. So sometimes I feel like maybe you might steamroll them, and other times you're just not going to be able to keep up. That one's just kind of a riskier one, and I do think those types of matchups are the ones you want to really win the die rolls on. Like, I'd much rather lose the die roll against Snake Eye, and I'd much rather win the die roll against Labrynth. You know, for me, because a lot of my cards are better suited for Snake Eye, so going second, I have a good chance of stopping them. Against Labrynth, it was not the case. So what we'll do now is just jump to an in-depth tournament report, talk about each match, kind of what I learned, mistakes I made, and what I would do going forward. And I have an interesting game one loss that I received for an issue with my deck in round 8 that was very nerve-wracking, so we'll kind of discuss that. Everyone, so what we're going to do now is jump into my more in-depth coverage of my tournament report, and we'll have our first round against Pure Snake Eye. And I did my best to try to make sure everything is lined up properly with what happened in the games. I believe this is correct, but if anything is off, some things kind of merge together throughout the day. So hopefully everything is correct here. Just as a kind of caveat in case anyone's watching that I faced and they're like, no, this was in a different game. I am trying to do a lot of this off memory because I didn't get a lot of time in between rounds to write a lot of this stuff out. So I didn't get to record it like in the moment to make this completely accurate as possible. So what we're going to do in this one is go over my Pure Snake Eye matchup. I definitely made some mistakes in this that did make this a lot harder. And I definitely, I think, could have won this match overall due to better technical play. And that was just kind of an issue on my part. I did win the dice roll, which was really helpful for the first round. So it's a big win there. And we go to do our play, and I get hit with a Mourner on the Crimson Dragon, and I didn't think about it making Calamity miss timing. Because with a win effect, if the monster's being summoned out by a card effect, it has to be the last thing that happens. And the Mourner is able to make it where the Crimson Dragon's effect's not the last thing that happens. So I should have went for a Blazar there to have a negate still. And at that point, I really just didn't have much. I didn't open a ton of hand traps. So I wasn't able to really stop them. And they got the full combo and went to game 2. In game 2, we just kind of traded hand traps back and forth. Eventually got into a grindy game and I was able to win. And then game 3, I definitely made some mistakes here. Just kind of got in my head too much. So I opened 2 hand traps, Valor and Delta. And I was like, wow, this is pretty solid. So he starts with Bonfire, and I don't know why in my head I was like, oh, I can wait to punish him later with the Delta instead of stopping the Bonfire. I knew at that point, usually when they start with Bonfire, it generally means they have a weak hand. So they don't want to start with Bonfire because they play into Droll. I don't think Droll is as common now. So I was like, maybe I can wait. And that was a mistake. I should have just Delta'd him because I already had Valor for follow-up anyway. So it probably would have just ended his turn, and I would have just won because I had 3 starter cards. I had a Primera, I think Emblem of Oath, or Stand Up, one or the other, and I also had Branded Fusion. So if he would have just passed there, I would have won. I don't, there's any way he would have been able to stop me at that point. So I end up letting it go through, and I don't adjust, which is another issue. I got so caught up in my head, it's like, oh, I can negate the original, that'll be good. And it's like, yeah, that would be good. But again, it's a pure Snake Eye deck. They usually go for that field spell, and then I didn't negate the field spell. So still waiting for the original. So I got into my head and I overthought, and then I didn't adjust. So kind of misplayed almost twice there due to just bad technical play. And even after the game, I was like, I don't know why I did what I did. Kind of thinking back on it, I already knew it was wrong. We get to this grindy game. I end up kind of pushing into his board some. I end up making a Mirror Jade as my last play of my Branded Fusion, kind of pushing through his board and then saving it for the follow-up. And I was able to kind of set up my field and actually do okay even with the misplays that I made. So I made another misplay here by putting Mirror Jade into an Anima Zone, and that really hurt. Yeah, I kind of clogged up my main zones, and I didn't even think about putting it in the extra monster zone, which would have been the correct play, because he was able to kind of force it out, and that really helped him with pushing and kind of breaking what I had left. So those are kind of the mistakes I made there, bad zone placement and just bad technical calls with what to imperm and what to delta. So that was just my mistake at that point. So just things to consider, try to kind of analyze what's going on in your games, think about it later, try to always use that to improve. And I did do that throughout the tournament and did help in some games. All right, so what we'll do is move on to the next round. Everyone, this is Editing Max. If you're enjoying the content, hit that thumbs up button, give the video a like, leave any comments if you have any discussions you want to start, and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more of this type of content. Everyone, thanks again for watching the content. I hope you enjoy, and we'll get back to it. Next was against Goblin Biker. So I was able to do Calamity combo, but my opponent was able to play it because there was summoned 2 monsters and they were able to go into Big Gabonga. This was able to use one of the other monsters to detach on my turn to then steal my Calamity. And I was able to push through this and overpower him. We just went to the next game. And then game 2, my opponent misplayed with his hand traps. So I ended up siding in Fenrir because I didn't think he was going to keep a Nibiru's, but he had like Imperm Nibiru, and he just Impermed me to stop me from playing. And I wasn't able to get to my combo from there. So the Nibiru was dead in his hand. So it would have just been better for him to hold the Imperm and just Nibiru me, because maybe he just didn't realize it, that the Centur-Ion deck plays into Nibiru when you summon Fenrir. So I think that was just a misplay on his part. I also did a bad side. I was assuming the Goblin Bikers were all the same type and that I could super poly them with the Garua, but I realized when looking through his stuff in game 2, which is something I should have checked more in game 1, been more preemptive on what I was going to side, I ended up siding in Super Poly. I got really lucky that he did the Takum Tom borderline, because that was 2 win machines. So I was able to Super Poly him for Garua, and then I grew into a Chaos Angel, which was very helpful. I did make a misplay because at that point I forgot to draw off the Garua, which would have helped me. I would have won the game earlier than I ended up doing, because I would have had the extra draw to use with my stand-up that I had. So because of that, I wasn't able to actually use stand-up because I didn't have a card to send. So that was definitely a misplay that did hurt. But I was able to use Chaos Angel and SP because I was able to stop his Horus lines, because he was able to use the Horus cards, and those are very scary since I think the Sarcophagus could send the Chaos Angel. I was able to banish the Sarcophagus and then also use Horus SP to banish the Horus, which was difficult to deal with. And then eventually got to a point where I did more damage than him. And then eventually a time was called and I was just sitting on a Chaos Angel and he wasn't able to do enough damage and never got to the battle phase. So I ended up winning that one in time, but it wasn't like a close call where I had to do a trick to like burn or anything. So definitely some misplays on my part there and got kind of lucky with some things. But I do think my deck was better overall, but it definitely could have been closer. So I think those misplays definitely could have ended up hurting me, but I think we also would have went to a game 3 and I would have had a good chance in that situation too by just going first and playing correctly. So, but then at that point, maybe we would have went to time. So who knows? So definitely got lucky, even though there's some misplays there in game 2. So in game 1, we just ended up trading hand traps and I didn't have Enigmaster Packbit. I started with Judea and then used, played through one hand trap, extended into stand up, got Primera, got hand trapped again. And I didn't really have anything I could do besides SP, which kind of sucked. So in this situation, I really did miss the Enigmaster Packbit not being in the deck. So it's something I would have liked to have done and had. And in that case, I could have actually used Enigmaster Packbit, put Primera back and then have a double interruption on his turn. And I think that would have really helped. He plays through this few interruptions I did have and my hand traps, and I can't push through his board, which I tried. And it was just too floaty and too sticky. Game 2, I misplayed my Calamity line. I drew Emmet and I discarded it, thinking I could still make the line work, where I should have just went for the Wake Up I did after discarding it, or I should have kept it in hand. But my opponent said he had nothing for the Calamity lock, so if I would have Calamity'd him correctly, I would have just won. It was just a misplay on my part, and I just did the wrong line and messed that one up, so he would have at least went to a game 3. I don't know if I would have won this one, but there were some deck building issues in this one, and then technical play issues in game 2. So I think there's definitely chances to have won this matchup, and that was just unfortunate. And ideally, game 2 is really hoping to also draw the Super Polys, which I didn't see. So definitely upping the count on that feels better in the future. So game 1, I won the dice roll, and this is one of those where I'm glad I won the dice roll. I do feel like this deck is a decent matchup against Runick Stun overall, but these types of games are the ones I want to win the matchups on more, just because they're a lot scarier going second into them. So game 1, again, good dice roll win and good matchup. I was able to stop Hugin, and he also made a misplay of his Runick, targeting the stand-up Centur-Ion, which was protected, so that helped. I was also able to make a really good play where he ended up using his Hugin and I think a Trickstar, because he was playing a Runick Trickstar stun, which was interesting because he was using the Reincarnation to banish more cards out of hand, try to get key cards away, and speed up the banishing of the deck, as well as using just the standard Trickstar engine as bodies and recursion. So I thought it was pretty cool and an interesting way to play it. You do, I think, lose to some extent some of the trap card options, but you get more bodies and more banishing options, so it definitely seemed interesting. He was able to then go into SP. Instead of targeting my field spell, he targeted Primera, which maybe was the correct move. In his head, I don't know if he knew if I had the Phalanx down, but he banished my SP, and then I used my Primera to summon itself, so that made it so that way it was no longer the same target. And then I used my triggers. I activated the Primera as Chainlink 1 and Field Spells Chainlink 2 to search and synchro. He tried to use the Phalanx to remove my Primera, and then I was able to banish the SP with Phalanx, make it so that way the SP wouldn't go through, because SP has to banish both. And I was able to make my synchro line. As went to Crimson, I waited and I didn't shotgun it. I only had a couple cards in hand. He set them because he didn't have Fountain. And then once he set them, I was able to use Crimson to go into my Blazar. And then he had a skill drain set, but it didn't matter at that point because I had Blazar to negate it. So I made a really smart play there. So that ended up working out well. So I thought I played well in that game. And then game 2, I was able to imperm Hugin again. He wasn't able to get to Fountain, so it was huge. And then I did make a small misplay. It didn't really cost me the game. I was in control of the game the whole time, but it did make it where the game took longer than it should have. I was able to Ash Blossom his Reincarnation. I don't know what happened. I was like, oh, I think I can Ash Blossom that. I read it and I was like, oh, he's not drawing for some reason. And in my head, I'm like, you can't do that, but obviously you can. So I just messed up there. I ended up banishing my only Elbaz in hand and then drew into 2 Branded Fusions, which are dead. If I would have just ashed that, it just would have been safer. But I was able to set up a really nice grind game of Auxilia and Primera, where I eventually had 2 Primeras in my spell trap and Auxilia, so I could bring one out and keep one in the spell trap, which protected my Auxilia, which is also protecting my other cards, which made it pretty hard for the Runick deck to play through my boards. And I just kind of overpowered him and out-resourced him because he wasn't able to get to Fountain, which is very good. So again, a good matchup, but I think overall good technical play too. But the guy was really cool. I really liked his deck and it was really fun talking to him. This is round 5. I went against Dinomorphia. I got very lucky and also won the die roll here. So I won a lot of die rolls, I think all of them at this point. But I was feeling pretty down that I lost some games that I shouldn't have, especially being so lucky with so many die roll wins. But game 1, good die roll, and I set up Blazar and I outgrinded him. I just couldn't get to his play going. Game 2, I felt like maybe I could play through his board. He just set 5, negated a lot of my cards, and I just was not able to grind through it. So we just go to game 3. I think that's one thing important to realize with Dinomorphia, is I think one of the strengths of Dinomorphia is like a hidden one, that because they're constantly lowering their life points, you always feel like you have a chance to win. He had like 500 life points. I'm like, if I could just attack, I'll win. And I just couldn't get to that point. And we went to game 3, and that was the right call. And then in game 3, I opened Super Poly in my starting hand going first. And I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to win the game. I'm going to use this to really outgrind him and like choke him out once he uses a lot of his cards. So we get into like a grindier game, and I wasn't able to get to like any like Blazar lines or anything. So we're just kind of in a grindier game. I end up super polying my Lubellion, which was negated, and his fusion after he already lowered his life points to like lower than 500. I was super polyed him and went into Draco's Tabelia and ended up attack game for game, and you just couldn't do anything about it. He did say that was the first time I got super polyed that game, so kind of holding that super poly, really waiting to find the right time to use it since he can't respond to it or negate it. And I was really hoping to take both of his fusions. If he brought both of them out, like the Rexstrom and the other one, that was kind of the plan. But it still worked out, ended up winning, so I played well on all of those games too. I don't think there's really any misplays there. And then round 6, where I wish I would have won the die roll, I opened Imperm and Effect Failure, which isn't terrible against Labrynth, but he just set 5, so I was like, cool, these don't do anything. I did have a minor misplay where maybe I should have Imperm Lady. I think that would have been correct normally, but he still had the big welcome set, so he could have just dodged it anyway, but it probably was still better to do that and force that out. So that was probably the minor mistake, but I don't think it changed anything. And then game 2, I got double impermed, and he was able to discard a rollback with his furniture and then got into his play. I wasn't really able to do anything. I had Primera and Branded Fusion. He just hand trapped both of them. Plus then he had rollback. So even if I had another card, he could have rolled back that and then still had his play. So I just got outgrinded. I mean, in a normal match against them, maybe I could have done something, but in this case, it was not what happened, and I just wasn't able to play. So I just got outgrinded. The guy was really cool. He played very well. I don't think he made any mistakes that I noticed. So I thought he did a very good job. So then round 7, I go against Purrely. I asked his Prosperity and I imperm Black Hat. I'm feeling pretty good, but he's still able to make Noir. I try to push through it, but I think at that point with the setup he had, I don't know if I would. And then game 2, I opened Cosmic Cyclone plus my setup. So he tries to play into the board, and Cosmic is my friend, and you just can't play through it. And then game 3, I was able to stop his setup. I was able to make Chaos Angel and use that on the field spell. So he was able to set up slightly. So game 3, I was able to stop his setup. He still had the field spell though, but he didn't have anything major. It wasn't like a Noir. I was able to use the cards I drew. I drew like a very interesting hand where I also had the Deltas and the Bestials. So I was able to make my own kind of setup, and he had the field spell. So that was the main thing. It's like I couldn't target any of his cards with my failings I had. So I ended up going for Chaos Angel and banishing the field spell. And then that made it so then his cards could be targeted. And then I was able to failings away his Synchro that he went into the one. He tried to go into the one for negating first, but I went into Chaos Angel, so it didn't do anything. So then he went to the one to try to attack to get a lot of Purrely's quick play spells. And I was able to phalanx his monster now that the field spell was gone. And then, that lost all the materials. He didn't have anything. He was lower on life points because of my friend. And I ended up winning because we just went to time, and I was in a good spot. So I did win a few games in time at this point, but none of them were overly close. We had plenty of time to actually play. So I played really well. I felt in this one, I don't think I really made any mistakes. And I thought I played really well in the last game, and he even said he's like, that was really good, like the Chaos Angel, Phalanx and everything. So that ended up working out really well. But round 8, my deck box opens up in my bag. So I am rushing because I wanted to make sure we start the round on time. Because I'd used the bathrooms. I was rushing to get to the table. I open my bag. My deck box opens up. I'm like, oh my god. So everything's mixed together with my side deck and extra deck and everything else. So I'm trying to separate everything out. I thought I had everything, and I sorted everything. My side deck was correct. My extra deck was good. My deck looked okay. And I presented my deck, and I look in my bag. So I was making sure everything was set up under my chair so no one could grab it. And I saw 3 of my cards in there, and I looked, they're for my deck. So I bring it up to my opponent, and I was like, what do you want to do? Because we didn't look at our cards, but I did present my deck. So he's like, well, let's call a judge. So we called a judge, and he brought a head judge, and he explained, he asked, can I play with my deck? And I was like, no, it's a 40 card deck, so I'm under the limit. And he's like, okay, I have to give you a game loss because of the fact that your deck isn't legal and you presented it. I was like, okay, I understand. So I was like, what do we do for game 2? Do we side? Do we not side? He's like, you're just going to go into game 2 without siding, but you get to choose if you go first or second since you lost game 1. I'm like, okay. So I got to go first. I was able to do my setup with hand traps, and I won. So I was like, okay, thank God. At this point, I'm X3, and my only chance to even get an invite is potentially X3. So I was like, I'm glad I didn't just lose my first game to a game loss and then lose game 2. So that would have really felt defeating. So I was like, cool, we get to go to game 3. So game 3, I open a God Hand. I open up the ability to play. I open up 2 Shifters and a Bestial. I'm still kind of tilted from the first game, and I'm very excited about my hand for the third game. I Shifter him. He's like, oh, geez. He kind of just doesn't do anything. And I summon my Bestial on my turn, and I banish my Shifter. and I summon it in defense for no reason outside of just, I think in my head I was still thinking I couldn't attack since nothing really happened on his turn. It was almost like I was going first in my head. I know sometimes I do when I kind of forget my opponent just couldn't play. And then I summoned Trudea, he imperms it with the only card he set. He didn't play any monsters, and I just passed back to him. And I just didn't attack. And I was like, as soon as I passed back, I was like, oh my god, I didn't attack. And I also summoned my Bestial Magnemite in defense mode. What am I doing? So I was like, okay, well, I still have another shifter. So I shifter him again because I banished the only card in my grave to summon the Bestial. And he's like, oh my god, really? So like we kind of go back and forth. I should have OTK'd him that next line. If I even not summoning the Bestial Magnemite and attacking, if I would have just attacked with the Trudea, I would have had enough to kill him the next turn because he just summoned low and searched a card and passed. I could have just killed him right then and there. I just was short like under 1,000 life points for damage. So we end up getting into a very grindy game. Eventually, we also have the time extension for the judge call and everything. So it gets to a point where I literally get him down to 50 life points and I have 8,000. And we keep dueling. It gets into a point where I actually lose control of the duel. And we end up getting to a state where I end up opening like a really good hand at the end. It's like a Delta, a Druid Worm, and an Ash. Instead of taking the bait for negating the Druid Worm in hand, which I think it's a hard call to make. I don't think you would ever read I had Gamma, but I think it's also like, I don't know if that was correct either. So he did it. I Gamma'd him. I destroyed his ritual, and I was able to then Ash the spell engrave to summon out, which really hurt. But we did get to a point where he is able to still again outgrind me and attack me directly because he pretty much only had like 10 seconds by the time it was his turn, and he just attacks for like 4,100. I'm still up on life points when time's called, so I end up winning. So I literally, it should have been a super like non-game, and I closed it out in 5 minutes, but I almost ended up losing and potentially like through the game like almost two or three times. So I was very lucky that I did win with how bad I played in game 3, but it was kind of helpful because it did feel very much like the pressure of like maybe being on stream or feature. So I think that was kind of helpful for that nerves in the future. And, you know, I learned a lot, I think, from just helping myself cope with that stress in that game. Hey everyone, this is Editing Max. If you're enjoying the content and you want to support the channel, you can check out the TCG affiliate link in the description below. It supports the channel and costs you nothing, and you'll just be doing the same thing you normally do when buying cards from TCG Player. If you're new to buying cards from TCG Player, check out my website. I have a section on it that helps out newer people, kind of explaining some aspects of TCG Player, so that way you get the most out of your money and don't kind of fall into any of these kind of weird things that some people do to kind of push up the prices of cards. If you want to become a patron of the channel, check out my Patreon. It's another way you can help support the channel. We have different perks you can check out, like a lot of archetype proxies you can see on the screen. Every week I put a new one out that everyone on the channel can vote on, and then those go to Patreon for you can print out. You can also join for early access. Some videos will be 1 day early access, others that are in a longer series could be, you know, weeks out in advance where you can get the entire thing at once. Everyone on YouTube has to wait week by week for all of the videos to come out. You can also join for a exclusive Yu-Gi-Oh! Reaction series where I watch through the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime and we can have a discussion in the comments and kind of watch through it together as well, plus other perks coming out in the future. Everyone, thanks again for watching the content. All right, so we're at the last round of the day. I'm X3, so I definitely can't top in any way for this, but there's the potential of getting an invite still at this point because it was the top 48 players that get your invite, and X3s have a chance. It's not great, but you do have a chance still. So I win the dice roll, and I'm like, awesome, last round, I win the dice roll, and I open all hand traps, and I open 3 Ash Blossom, and the 3 Ash Blossom were my first 3 cards. Now I power shuffled my deck, my opponent power shuffled their decks, we shuffled each other's decks and like cutting them. And somehow I opened 3 Ash Blossom in a row, which is crazy. So I don't know how that happened, but I did. I had Ash Blossom, I think Effect Veiler, and Nibiru, so I was like, well, I still could potentially make it to the next turn. He had a lot of gas, and I did misplay my Nibiru. I was thinking about it using a Nibiru going with my opponent going first, but I wasn't thinking about the fact that I literally passed turn with nothing, so all he has to do is kill me. So he got to the point before he went into Flameburst Dragon where he used Oak, you know, Ash, Poplar, they're all in the field. And I should have just Nibiru'd him there. That would have been the best chance to really slow him down. But I didn't do that. I should have. And he got to a point where he brought Flameburst out, because in my head I was like, I'll just let him extend as far as possible and then Nibiru him and then like try to stop his follow-up plays and stuff. And that was definitely not the right call in the situation, because he's like, go to battle phase for game, and I was like, oh wait, he can kill me. I have to Nibiru him, and he got the follow-up from the Flame Burst, and I just wasn't able to put enough to kind of stop him. I went to my turn to draw. I didn't get anything except another hand trap, and just really couldn't play into the board. So it was unfortunate. I definitely made a mistake there, but I was like, okay, I gotta learn from this Nibiru to not make that mistake again. So I was a lot more cognizant of that. Game 2, I open up just a killer combo where I have Shifter set up with Judea. I also drew Super Poly. So I felt really good with this. I shifted him right away at the kind of draw phase, and he kind of tried to play into it. I ended up Super Polying him to a Chaos Angel, and even though I could have Calamity'd him, I wanted to try this out all day, and I felt very safe under Shifter against Snake Eye anyway. So I really wanted to try out this idea of Super Polying Snake Eye when they go for the Snake Eye Ash and the Poplar, because those are two of the same type you can go for Garua. And what's nice about this is it stops them from being able to go Nightmare Phoenix and pop the Super Poly and discard and then play through original. Because if you do wait, they could potentially do that if they hit the Super Poly, especially if it's the only set you have. I did have more set with the trap, but it was something I wanted to try out. So you can usually go into Garua and then, bring out your Primera whenever you want to go into Chaos Angel on the opponent's turn, banishing a card and searching follow-up. So it's just pretty nice. So he just wasn't able to play through it and conceded. We go to game 3 for a good amount of time left. My opponent starts, I think just effect veilered his Ash for Snake Eye Ash, and he passes turn. I'm like, wow, I think I just won. So I go to start my combo and I use like Primera, I get the field spell, I activate the field spell. He uses Ogre on the field spell, and I was like, oh, it can't be destroyed because I have my Centurion card. He's like, oh my god, okay, yeah, that's fine. So it's just Ogre goes through, nothing happens. So it's like, okay, that's huge. I might have lost if he Ogre'd me, or at least had to pass back. So he only has one card set and the Ash on the field, so I go to do my standard line. I'm reading it as a Imperm, which it was not. It was a Solemn Judgment. And I go into Legacia, because at this point I'm like, look, let's just dig into more hand traps, do a bunch of damage, set up my combo, and just really try to insulate the game and end it. So I didn't have a ton of hand traps in hand. I had more engine, so I wanted to try to draw into something extra. And that was also, I think, a mistake on my part still, to a degree. I think it's generally just better to go for Exilia there on Pistiles. So I didn't read it was a Solemn Judgment. I go into Legacia and I get Solemn Judgmented, which really hurt because at that point I wasn't running Gargoyle, and I did have a way to get Gargoyle with Emblema, but I had nothing else to search off Emblema because I already summoned all my Centurions in deck. So it left his Snake Eye Ash on the field, which is a huge misplay on my part potentially. I think it's fair to read that it was like an Imperm versus like a Solemn Judgment. It's not like I've seen it. Solemn's not a super common card, so it did kind of throw me off. But not being able to get rid of that monster really gave him a lot of options going into his next turn to be able to use it to get other cards. And I did pretty good with where I Nibiru'd him. I Nibiru'd him at the right spot. But what I should have done is summoned out my monsters on the resolution of him getting to his field spell. But I didn't do it, and I realized that like right after he activated, I was like, shoot, okay. I still have a couple cards left with the trap card and I think one other card in hand. So I was like, I'll just go into Auxilia and just try to sit on some follow-up. He did lose 4,000 life points. Let's see if I can just stop him. But at that point, because I was summoning on his turn after he had the field spell and he got the Flame Burst, he was able to get his Flame Burst out, and I used the trap on the Flame Burst, and he was able to end up pushing into like a Selene access code OTK and killing me. If I would have done that properly, what I should have done is on resolution done my synchro plays, or maybe even not have done the even special summon anything out at that point, but I wanted to try to get the follow-up. But I think ideally at this point what I should have done is on resolution of him searching the field spell, I should have used my cards as quick effects to summon out, make my Exilia line, get my search for follow-up, and kind of try to sit on this for some protection and hope he can't kill me through this, and then I'll still have the trap card. And at this point, because I'm not summoning anymore, I'm not actually going to allow him to trigger his field spell to get the Flame Burst out. If he does go for the Selene line, I'd be able to use the Phalanx, get rid of the Selene, and from there I don't think he could have climbed up to do enough damage to kill me, and I would have been, I think, pretty safe with the life points I had and going back to my turn. So there definitely was some mistakes on my part here that could have done it. Now also, I think my opponent's mistake was more deadly to him if I would have played that correctly. I think him ghost ogring my Primera, as well as having a judgment set, I think the game was over. I don't think I really had any business of even being able to win the game if he played it properly as well. So that's something to consider, that I got lucky he misplayed the ogre. I wouldn't have been able to push through. Like, I probably wouldn't have been able to do anything if he ogred my Primera, most likely. So that really hurts with the deck only having the 1 tuner access right now, outside of potentially setting up a synchro on their turn, and then he would just ogred my ability when I summoned the synchro. The other thing that hurt in that game was because I didn't go Auxilia first and that got Solemn Judgmented. If I would have had Legacia in the extra deck, I could have went Legacia, pop another card to kind of get rid of some of his resources, making it harder for him to extend, while also drawing into a hand trap to potentially stop him. So that also would have been helpful as well, to potentially help me, live through that game. So some different things to consider and think about and kind of looking back at this matchup. Everyone, well, that's the end of my tournament experience. I ended up going X4 at the end of it. I definitely learned a lot. I had some plays I was really proud of, some other things I wasn't. I think a lot of it just, was down to technical play, and there's really only one match for sure I know I just really couldn't have won. I think just due to hands and the matchup being kind of rough. But I think most of them I could have at least either won the game or had a much better chance in the game if I would have played correctly. So I hope this overall experience and talking through all this helps you and kind of do better in your own games as well, and kind of talk through some things that happened in the tournament, maybe how to deal with stress or other aspects while playing, and things to consider. Definitely take your time, give yourself a chance to respond. Don't kind of take advantage of the situation, by constantly saying thinking when you don't have plays or anything like that. I'm not saying that you should kind of stall out your opponent or slow play. I think it's okay to, not rush into things. There's a few times I was like, yeah, that's fine. Instead of giving my, self just even 1 to 3 seconds to think, but like 1 sec, I think it's easy to kind of get into the habit or kind of pacing of the game of moving too quickly and making mistakes. Everyone, I hope this entire kind of process of going through the kind of tournament experience with my deck was helpful and kind of seeing everything. If you're only watching this in the smaller part of the tournament report, you want to see more, check out the description. I'll have all the other aspects of this kind of series linked below with those individual videos. And I hope this was helpful. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. And if there's any comments or suggestions you have, or you like the video and you want to leave a like to show support, I'd appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video, and I'll see you there.